Let's talk about one of history's most epic showdowns, the story of Galileo Galilei. Here was a scientist, a genius, whose incredible discoveries put him on a direct collision course with the most powerful institution of his time, the Catholic Church. This is a big one. Let's dive right in. This quote, it tells you everything you need to know about Galileo. He truly believed that the universe wasn't just some mystery to be understood through faith alone. No, he thought you could understand it through observation, through measurement, and through math. That was a radical idea, and it's exactly that belief that was going to get him into some very, very deep trouble. So, here's how we're going to break down this incredible story. First up, we'll look at Galileo's rise, how he became a scientific rock star, then the inevitable collision between his new science and the old way of thinking. After that, we'll get into the trial itself, the big showdown in Rome. And finally, we'll talk about his legacy, a legacy that, you'll see, is still moving the world. Okay, so our story really kicks off with one man and his new toy, the telescope. Now, Galileo didn't actually invent it, but back in 1609, he built a version that was so powerful it would completely change how we see our place in the cosmos, forever. So Galileo was born way back in 1564, and he was always a brilliant guy. But 1610, that's when he really exploded onto the scene. He published this little book, The Starry Messenger, and boom, he was an overnight sensation across Europe. Think about it. For the first time in human history, someone was giving a first-hand account of what the heavens actually looked like up close. And the stuff he saw, it was just mind-blowing. Each one of these discoveries was like a dagger to the heart of the old worldview. Mountains on the moon? Wait, the heavens were supposed to be perfect, smooth spheres. Moons orbiting Jupiter? That proved not everything revolved around the Earth. But the phases of Venus, that was the smoking gun. He saw Venus go through a full set of phases, just like our moon, which is something that's totally impossible if Venus and the sun are both circling the Earth. It was the first solid visual proof that the old model was wrong. And this is where it all starts to go wrong. To really get why his ideas were so dangerous, you have to remember the times. The Catholic Church was in the middle of the Counter-Reformation, basically trying to lock down its authority. Any challenge to its worldview wasn't just a debate, it was seen as a direct attack. This slide lays it all out, plain and simple. On one side, you have the Church's view, geocentrism. Earth is the center of everything. And this wasn't just science, it was theology, backed by a literal reading of the Bible. There's a passage where the sun is commanded to stand still, right? That was seen as proof. On the other side, you have heliocentrism, the sun-centered model that Galileo's telescope was now showing was, actually real. And let's be crystal clear about something. This was not just an academic argument. To go against the Church's official doctrine was to commit heresy, and heresy was a crime, investigated by the Inquisition. The stakes for Galileo really could not have been higher. We're talking prison or worse. So in 1616, the Church made it official. The sun-centered theory was heresy. They warned Galileo personally, drop it. And for years, he did. He kept his head down. But then, in 1632, he published his masterpiece, the Dialogue. He had an old friend who was now the Pope, and he probably felt a little protected. Big mistake. He framed it as a debate, but he made the character defending the Church's view look like a total idiot. The Pope felt betrayed, and the hammer came down. The book was banned, and Galileo was summoned to Rome. And so, we get to the main event. In 1633, an old and sick Galileo is dragged before the Roman Inquisition to answer for his life's work. It was a showdown between one of the greatest minds in history and one of the most powerful institutions on Earth. The charge was pretty straightforward. He had disobeyed that order from 1616. Galileo tried to argue, hey, I was just discussing it hypothetically. But nobody was buying it. He was interrogated under the threat of torture. Can you imagine the psychological pressure on this old man? It must have been terrifying. And then the verdict came down. Vehemently suspect of heresy. Those are the words that sealed his fate. He was forced to get on his knees and publicly renounce, to curse and detest the very ideas he had proven were true. In order to save his own life, he had to deny what he had seen with his own eyes. Now there's this legend that as Galileo got to his feet, he muttered under his breath, and yet it moves. It probably never happened, let's be honest. But the reason that story has stuck around for centuries is because it captures this incredibly powerful idea. You can force someone to say something, but you can't change what's true. And this is where the story takes a turn, because Galileo's condemnation couldn't stop the truth. In a way, his failure in that courtroom was actually a massive turning point for science. Galileo spent the rest of his days under house arrest. But here's the amazing part. He didn't stop working. While he was a prisoner in his own home and going blind, he wrote another masterpiece. It had to be smuggled out of Italy just to get published. He died a prisoner in 1642. But his ideas, they were already loose in the world. So how long did it take for the church to officially say, you know what, we messed up? This long. It wasn't until 1992, more than 350 years after the trial, that Pope John Paul II finally admitted the church had made a mistake in condemning Galileo. So why do we still care about this 400-year-old story? Because it's the ultimate cautionary tale about what happens when any ideology tries to shut down science. It marks a huge shift towards evidence and experiments being more important than just authority. And honestly, the questions this whole affair raises are more relevant today than ever, with all the modern debates we have about science and truth. And really, that's the big question this leaves us with, isn't it? Galileo's whole life forces us to ask, when is it not just our right, but our duty to question authority when we're chasing after the truth? It's something we're thinking about. If you found this explainer informative, hey, do me a favor and hit that like button, drop a comment, and be sure to subscribe for more deep dives into the topics that shape our world. Thanks for watching.